No one in American history had ever dared to file such a massive lawsuit against a First Lady. While the $100 million defamation case dominated every headline, Melania Trump was unaware of one crucial fact. Jasmine Crockett possessed secret documents that would destroy her reputation forever. The bright studio lights of the Dallas Education Summit cast long shadows across the polished conference table where America's most powerful women sat discussing the future of public schooling. What started as a routine policy panel was about to explode into the most shocking political confrontation of the decade. First Lady Melania Trump, elegant in her signature understated style, had just finished discussing federal education funding when she made the comment that would change everything. Her voice carried that familiar European accent as she leaned slightly toward the microphone. "We must ensure that our taxpayer dollars are used responsibly," she said, her eyes scanning the panel with calculated precision. "Unfortunately, we've seen too many examples of those who have used public resources for personal indulgences, living lavishly while claiming to serve the people." The words hung in the air like poison gas. Everyone in that room, and the millions watching live on C-SPAN, understood exactly who she was targeting. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, sitting just 3 seats away, felt the blood drain from her face as cameras instinctively swiveled toward her like vultures sensing weakness. But what happened next would prove that underestimating Jasmine Crockett was the biggest mistake Melania Trump would ever make. Within minutes of the comment, the clip was everywhere. Twitter exploded with hashtags like #Melania lied and #taxpayer truth. Instagram stories multiplied like wildfire, with influencers and ordinary citizens alike sharing reaction videos. TikTok users created response content faster than the platform's algorithms could process them. The coded language was crystal clear to everyone watching. The First Lady had just publicly accused a sitting Congresswoman of corruption without providing a single shred of evidence to support her claim. "Those who have used taxpayer dollars for personal indulgences" became the phrase that launched 1,000 conspiracy theories. Right-wing blogs immediately picked up the narrative, manufacturing elaborate stories about Jasmine's alleged misconduct. Conservative podcasters spent hours speculating about hidden bank accounts and secret luxury purchases. Left-wing outlets defended her vigorously, but the damage was spreading faster than any defense could possibly contain it. The narrative had taken on a life of its own, growing and mutating as it spread across social media platforms and cable news networks. In her Washington office that evening, Jasmine sat in stunned silence as her phone buzzed incessantly with notifications. Death threats flooded her voicemail. Accusations filled her email inbox. Demands for congressional investigations dominated her social media mentions. Her staff scrambled to respond to the overwhelming volume of communications. But how do you fight back against the most powerful woman in America when she has the entire conservative media machine amplifying her carefully crafted message? The situation seemed hopeless, the damage irreversible. That's when Jasmine made the decision that would shock the political establishment to its core. She wouldn't just defend herself against these baseless accusations. She would go on the offensive with the full force of the American legal system behind her. Jasmine Crockett wasn't just another politician who had stumbled into Congress through political connections or family money. Before entering the halls of power in Washington, she had built a formidable reputation as one of Texas's most brilliant and ruthless defense attorneys, known throughout the legal community for her methodical preparation and devastating cross-examinations that left opposing counsel questioning their career choices. She understood something that Melania's team of political operatives had fatally overlooked in their rush to damage her reputation. In defamation law, intent matters far more than impact. The question isn't whether someone was harmed by false statements, but whether those statements were made with knowledge of their falsity or with reckless disregard for the truth. And Jasmine was about to prove that Melania Trump had done exactly that. 3 days after the Dallas incident that had set the political world on fire, Jasmine called an emergency meeting with her legal team. But this wasn't about damage control or crisis management. This was about war. "I need everything," she told her chief counsel, Raymond Knox, a former federal prosecutor who had never lost a defamation case in 23 years of practice. "Every communication, every internal memo, every strategic document from the White House related to that comment. If this attack was planned and coordinated, I want definitive proof that will hold up in federal court." Raymond raised an eyebrow, understanding immediately the magnitude of what she was proposing. "Jasmine, you're talking about suing the First Lady of the United States for defamation. The optics alone could destroy your political career even if you win. The resources they'll throw at fighting this case will be unprecedented." "The optics," Jasmine interrupted, her voice carrying the steel that had made her legendary in Texas courtrooms, "are that a sitting Congresswoman was publicly defamed by someone who has never held elected office, never been subject to congressional ethics investigations, and never had her personal finances scrutinized and audited the way mine have been every single year I've served in Congress. The optics are that she lied about me on national television and thought she could get away with it because of her title." She opened her laptop and began pulling up meticulously organized digital files. "My financial records are pristine. Every expense is documented, categorized, reviewed, and approved by multiple oversight bodies. I've never used a single taxpayer dollar inappropriately, and I can prove it with mathematical precision. But more importantly, I can prove that she and her team knew my record was clean when she made her calculated comment designed to destroy my reputation." What Melania Trump and her inner circle didn't know was that Jasmine had been quietly building an intelligence network for months, not because she expected to be attacked in such a brazen manner, but because she understood from her legal background that in Washington, information is power, and power determines survival. She had learned to document everything, to build relationships with staffers across the political spectrum, and to always prepare for the worst-case scenario. The first weapon in her growing arsenal came from an unlikely source, a disgruntled White House communications staffer named Michael Chen, who had been systematically documenting inappropriate political operations for over a year. Chen had grown increasingly uncomfortable with what he saw as the weaponization of official White House resources for partisan political attacks. 3 weeks before the Dallas summit, this principled civil servant had reached out to Jasmine's office through secure channels with deeply concerning information about planned political operations, specifically targeting rising Democratic lawmakers who posed threats to the administration's agenda. The second weapon was even more devastating: internal email communications from the First Lady's personal staff that revealed the Dallas comment wasn't a spontaneous expression of concern about government waste. It was strategically planned, carefully timed, and deliberately crafted to cause maximum damage to Jasmine's reputation while maintaining what the lawyers called plausible deniability. The emails showed extensive preparation, including research into Jasmine's background, polling data about her approval ratings, and strategic discussions about the most effective ways to undermine her credibility. But the third weapon would prove to be absolutely nuclear: forensic digital evidence showing that the White House communications team had been systematically monitoring Jasmine's social media accounts, tracking her public appearances, analyzing her approval ratings in real time, and developing targeted messaging campaigns designed to damage her reputation specifically. This wasn't general political opposition research. This was a coordinated campaign of character assassination orchestrated at the highest levels of the American government. On a crisp Tuesday morning in October, with autumn leaves swirling around the federal courthouse steps, Jasmine Crockett walked through the imposing glass doors wearing a simple navy blue business suit and an expression of calm determination that masked months of preparation. There were no media circus antics, no grand theatrical gestures, no army of publicists crafting perfect sound bites. Just a woman seeking justice through the legal system that had trained her and shaped her worldview. At exactly 9 o'clock in the morning, the lawsuit that would reshape American political discourse was officially filed. 48 pages of legal precision, backed by exhibits that would dominate news cycles for months to come and forever change how political figures thought about the consequences of their public statements. Crockett vs. Trump. The case that would redefine political accountability in 21st century America and send shockwaves through every corridor of power from Washington to Wall Street. The core charge was defamation with reckless disregard for the truth, seeking $100 million in combined reputational and punitive damages. But the real shock came in the mountain of evidence that Jasmine's legal team had compiled during months of meticulous investigation. The first exhibit was the viral footage from the education panel, professionally authenticated and precisely time-stamped, paired with detailed analysis from expert linguists who confirmed that Melania's phrasing was intentionally and deliberately designed to imply criminal or unethical behavior without naming the subject outright, a classic defamation technique used to avoid direct legal liability while maximizing reputational damage. The second exhibit was absolutely devastating. Leaked internal emails proving that at least one senior member of the First Lady's communication staff had explicitly warned against making unfounded public statements about Congresswoman Crockett's financial conduct. That clear warning from a legal advisor was not only ignored, but the reply showed unmistakable strategic intent, not concerned about factual accuracy, but about maximum political impact and narrative control. The third exhibit was the smoking gun that would seal Melania's fate, a comprehensive series of sworn affidavits from Jasmine's former campaign treasurer, multiple House Ethics Committee representatives, independent auditors, and 2 senior congressional staffers who had handled her official expense reports for years. Each sworn statement confirmed that her financial record was absolutely spotless, reviewed annually by multiple oversight bodies, subjected to rigorous auditing procedures, and never once flagged for any form of investigation or concern. The response from 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue was swift, predictable, and utterly tone-deaf. Within hours of the filing, conservative media outlets launched a coordinated counterattack, claiming that Jasmine was weaponizing the federal court system and threatening the fundamental principle of free speech. Fox News dedicated entire segments to attacking her motives. Conservative radio hosts spent hours speculating about her real agenda. Social media influencers with millions of followers painted her as an opportunistic politician seeking to silence legitimate criticism. But what they didn't expect was Jasmine's sophisticated media strategy, developed not by political consultants, but by the same methodical legal mind that had never lost a major case. Instead of hiding behind lawyers and carefully crafted public relations statements, she held an impromptu press conference that same afternoon on the courthouse steps. Standing directly in front of the imposing federal building, she looked directly into the television cameras and delivered a statement that would be quoted in law schools and political science classrooms for decades to come. "This isn't about politics," she said, her voice steady and clear despite the chaos of camera flashes and shouted questions. "This isn't about Republicans versus Democrats or conservative versus liberal ideology. This is about whether powerful people can deliberately destroy someone's reputation with calculated lies and face absolutely no consequences for their actions. It's about whether we're a nation governed by laws that apply equally to everyone, or whether we've become a country where political influence and social status determine who gets held accountable for their behavior." The contrast between her direct, unfiltered communication and Melania's carefully managed public relations response was stark and immediately apparent to political observers. While the First Lady's team issued carefully worded denials through multiple layers of spokespeople and surrogates, Jasmine spoke directly to the American people with a clarity and authenticity that cut through the manufactured political noise like a laser through fog. 2 weeks into what had already become the most closely watched legal battle in recent American history, the story took another dramatic and unexpected turn that would shift public opinion permanently in Jasmine's favor. A second whistleblower emerged from deep within the White House communications office, bringing with them a treasure trove of internal documents that painted a disturbing picture of calculated political warfare conducted using taxpayer-funded resources and official government communication systems. The most damaging document in this new collection was a detailed strategy memo dated exactly 3 days before the Dallas Education Summit, outlining what the White House communications team euphemistically called targeted messaging opportunities designed to neutralize rising Democratic political stars who pose long-term threats to conservative policy objectives. Jasmine Crockett was listed by name at the top of the target list, with specific talking points carefully designed and focus group tested to question her financial integrity, commitment to taxpayer interests, and personal character. Even more shocking was a follow-up email from Melania's chief of staff, sent just hours after the Dallas incident had gone viral across every social media platform. Perfect execution on the Crockett operation. The coded language worked exactly as our polling predicted. She cannot respond effectively without appearing defensive and guilty, while we maintain complete plausible deniability. Recommend monitoring social media metrics and preparing follow-up messaging if the story starts to fade. When these documents were leaked to the Washington Post by sources described only as senior administration officials concerned about the weaponization of official government resources for partisan political attacks, the entire national narrative shifted overnight. This wasn't a spontaneous comment by a First Lady genuinely concerned about government waste and fiscal responsibility. This was premeditated, carefully orchestrated character assassination planned and executed at the highest levels of the federal government. The leaked documents sparked immediate calls for congressional investigations, ethics reviews, and criminal referrals. Legal experts appearing on cable news programs explained that using official White House resources to coordinate attacks on political opponents could constitute multiple violations of federal law, including the Hatch Act, which prohibits federal employees from engaging in political activities using government resources. By the time the case finally went to trial 8 months later, it had evolved into something much larger and more significant than a defamation lawsuit. It had become a national referendum on truth, accountability, and the fundamental question of whether anyone, regardless of their position or power, could be held responsible for deliberately spreading lies about their political opponents. The courthouse was packed every single day with journalists, legal observers, political scientists, and ordinary citizens who understood they were witnessing a historic moment in American jurisprudence. Cable news networks provided gavel-to-gavel coverage, with legal analysts breaking down every procedural motion and evidentiary ruling. Social media exploded with real-time commentary, reaction videos, and detailed analysis that accumulated millions of views and shares. Law professors assigned the case to their students as a real-time example of defamation law in action. Political science courses used it to examine the intersection of law and politics in contemporary American democracy. Jasmine's opening statement was a masterpiece of legal precision combined with moral clarity that resonated far beyond the confines of the federal courtroom. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," she began, standing confidently before the 12 citizens who would determine the outcome of this landmark case. "This case is fundamentally simple, despite all the political noise and media coverage surrounding it. The defendant used her unprecedented platform as First Lady of the United States to deliberately and systematically destroy my reputation with public statements she knew were completely false." She walked slowly in front of the jury box, making direct eye contact with each individual member, a technique she had perfected during her years as a trial attorney. "The evidence will demonstrate beyond any reasonable doubt that this attack on my character was planned weeks in advance by a team of political operatives working within the White House. It will show you that the defendant's communications staff systematically monitored my social media accounts, tracked my public approval ratings in real time, and developed specific language carefully designed to imply criminal corruption without technically making a direct accusation that could be easily challenged in court." Her voice never rose above a conversational tone, but the intensity and conviction behind her words was unmistakable to everyone present in the packed courtroom. Most importantly, the evidence will prove conclusively that they knew with absolute certainty that their accusations against me were false. My financial records have been matters of public record for years. They have been reviewed annually by the House Ethics Committee, audited by the Internal Revenue Service, and examined by multiple congressional oversight bodies. Not once, in all those years of scrutiny, has anyone found even the slightest indication of impropriety or misuse of public funds. She paused for a moment, allowing the weight of that statement to settle with the jury before delivering her closing argument. The defendant gambled that her position as First Lady would protect her from facing consequences for her deliberate lies about my character and integrity. Today, we find out whether that gamble was correct, or whether the principles of truth and accountability that founded this nation still mean something in 21st century America. The trial's most dramatic and pivotal moment came during the second week when Jasmine took the witness stand in her own defense. For more than 3 hours, she methodically walked the jury through her complete financial records, her congressional expense reports, and her unwavering commitment to transparency and ethical conduct throughout her career in public service. She explained every expenditure, justified every decision, and demonstrated with mathematical precision that every dollar of taxpayer money under her control had been spent appropriately and in accordance with all applicable laws and regulations. But the real courtroom fireworks began during cross-examination, when Melania's high-powered legal team attempted to paint Jasmine as an opportunistic politician using the federal court system for personal political gain and national media attention. The lead defense attorney, a partner at one of Washington's most prestigious law firms, approached the witness stand with obvious confidence. "Isn't it true, Ms. Crockett, that you viewed this incident as a golden opportunity to raise your national political profile and advance your career ambitions?" the lawyer asked, clearly expecting to rattle her with the aggressive questioning. Jasmine's response was devastating in its simplicity and directness. "Sir, with respect, I was already a sitting member of the United States Congress representing 750,000 Texas constituents. I already had a national platform, important committee assignments, and a growing reputation for effective legislative work on behalf of working families. What I didn't have before the defendant's attack was a destroyed reputation, death threats against my family members and constituents, questioning whether their elected representative was a criminal who had stolen their tax dollars." She leaned forward slightly in the witness chair, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had spent years in courtrooms facing down hostile attorneys. "The defendant took those things from me with calculated lies broadcast to millions of Americans. I'm here today to get my reputation back and to ensure that powerful people understand there are consequences for deliberately spreading false information about public servants." The defense attorney pressed further, apparently not recognizing that he was walking into a trap set by someone with far more courtroom experience than he possessed. "But surely you understand that public figures must accept legitimate criticism of their conduct and performance in office." "Criticism?" Jasmine interrupted, her voice finally showing the controlled anger that had been building throughout this ordeal. "Sir, criticism is questioning my policy positions, challenging my voting record, or disagreeing with my legislative priorities. What the defendant did was fundamentally different. She told millions of Americans that I had stolen their tax dollars for personal luxuries. That's not political criticism. That's defamation, and it's illegal regardless of who does it or what title they hold." The trial's decisive turning point came during the third week, when Jasmine's legal team introduced what they had been calling Exhibit X, a secretly recorded phone conversation between Melania's chief of staff and a prominent conservative media strategist. The recording had been obtained legally through a cooperating witness who had grown disgusted with the administration's systematic abuse of power. In the crystal-clear audio played for the jury, the chief of staff could be heard discussing detailed plans to maximize the long-term damage from the Dallas Education Summit comment. "We need to keep this corruption narrative alive for at least 2 weeks." The chief of staff's voice filled the silent courtroom. "Plant follow-up questions at our next public appearances. Make sure our media contacts have enough talking points to keep the story trending on social media. Coordinate with the bloggers and podcasters to maintain speculation about ongoing federal investigations. The conservative media strategist's response was equally damning. What happens if she releases her complete financial records and proves definitively that there's nothing inappropriate in her background? Doesn't matter at all, came the chilling reply that would be replayed on news programs for months afterward. By the time she can mount an effective defense, the narrative will be permanently established in the public consciousness. People will always wonder if there's something hidden that we just haven't discovered yet. The goal was never to destroy her career immediately. It's to plant seeds of doubt that will follow her for years and undermine her effectiveness as a political leader. When this devastating recording finished playing in the hushed courtroom, several jury members were visibly shaken by what they had heard. This wasn't political rhetoric or normal campaign opposition research. This was a deliberate criminal conspiracy to destroy someone's reputation and career using lies, conducted by people sworn to serve the American public with integrity and honesty. Melania's defense team found themselves in an impossible position that grew worse with each passing day of testimony. They couldn't deny the authenticity of the recorded conversations, which had been verified by multiple forensic audio experts. They couldn't dispute the documented evidence of the systematic monitoring and planning that had preceded the attack. They couldn't explain away the internal emails and text messages that showed clear intent to harm Jasmine's reputation, regardless of the truth. Their legal strategy devolved into increasingly desperate arguments that political speech should be protected even when demonstrably false, an argument that legal experts across the political spectrum immediately recognized as both legally baseless and fundamentally dangerous to democratic discourse. Constitutional law professors pointed out that defamation has never been considered protected speech under the First Amendment, especially when conducted with malicious intent and reckless disregard for the truth. During her own testimony, Melania attempted to claim that her comments had been misinterpreted by hostile media and taken completely out of their intended context. But under aggressive cross-examination by Jasmine's legal team, she was systematically forced to admit that she had never personally reviewed Jasmine's actual financial records, never attempted to verify the accuracy of her public accusations, and never reached out to clarify her statements or offer an apology when the devastating impact on Jasmine's reputation became undeniably apparent. The most damaging moment of Melania's testimony came when Jasmine's lead attorney asked what seemed like a simple, straightforward question. Mrs. Trump, based on your personal knowledge and the information available to you, do you actually believe that Congresswoman Crockett misused taxpayer funds for personal expenses? After a long, uncomfortable pause that seemed to stretch for eternity in the silent courtroom, Melania answered with obvious reluctance, I don't have personal knowledge of her specific financial situation. But ma'am, you accused her of exactly that behavior on national television while looking directly at her, didn't you? The attorney pressed, sensing weakness and moving in for the decisive blow. Another lengthy pause. I was speaking generally about the importance of government accountability. Mrs. Trump, with all due respect, when you said, those who have used taxpayer dollars for personal indulgences while staring directly at Congresswoman Crockett during a live television broadcast, were you truly speaking generally about accountability, or were you making a specific accusation against a specific person? The silence that followed stretched for nearly 30 seconds, an eternity in courtroom time, before Melania's attorney jumped up to object. But the damage had been done. The First Lady's inability to answer a direct question about her own actions spoke louder than any denial could have. After 12 intensive hours of deliberation that stretched late into the evening, the jury returned to the packed courtroom with a verdict that would send shockwaves through the American political establishment and reverberate through legal circles for generations. The jury foreman, a retired high school principal from suburban Dallas, stood with the official verdict document in his trembling hands. We, the jury, find in favor of the plaintiff, Jasmine Crockett, and against the defendant, Melania Trump, on all counts of defamation with reckless disregard for the truth. The courtroom erupted in gasps, whispers, and scattered applause before the judge firmly restored order with several sharp strikes of his gavel. But the jury wasn't finished delivering their historic judgment. "We award compensatory and punitive damages in the amount of $83 million, $33 million in compensatory damages for harm to reputation and career, and $50 million in punitive damages to deter similar conduct by other powerful individuals who might consider using their platforms to spread deliberate lies about public servants." It wasn't the full $100 million that Jasmine had initially sought, but it was the largest defamation award in American political history, and it sent an unmistakable message that would echo through every corridor of power. No one, regardless of their position or influence, is above the law when it comes to deliberately destroying someone's reputation with calculated lies. Outside the courthouse steps, surrounded by dozens of television cameras and hundreds of reporters from around the world, Jasmine addressed the assembled media one final time. Her statement was brief, but carried the weight of historic significance that everyone present could feel. "Today, justice prevailed," she said, her voice steady despite the emotional toll of the lengthy legal battle. "Not just for me personally, but for every public servant who has been targeted with lies and character assassination, every citizen who has been defamed by those in positions of power, and every American who still believes that truth and accountability matter more than political connections or social status." She paused, looking directly into the cameras that were broadcasting her words to millions of viewers across the nation and around the world. This case was never primarily about monetary damages. It was about establishing the principle of accountability. It was about proving that in the United States of America, your last name, your political connections, your wealth, or your official title cannot and will not protect you from facing consequences when you choose to spread deliberate falsehoods about other people's character and integrity. The verdict sparked a national conversation that dominated social media, cable news programs, newspaper editorials, and dinner table discussions across America. The topics included the fundamental responsibilities that come with holding positions of power and influence, the critical importance of truth and accuracy in political discourse, and the moral courage required to stand up against those who abuse their positions to harm others through calculated lies and character assassination. Legal scholars immediately recognized Crockett vs. Trump as a watershed moment in American jurisprudence that would fundamentally reshape how defamation law applies to political speech. Law schools across the country began incorporating the case into their curricula as a landmark example of how the legal system can hold powerful figures accountable for their actions. Political science professors cited it as a crucial turning point in the evolution of accountability standards for public figures in the digital age. But perhaps most importantly for the future of American democracy, the case proved definitively that careful preparation, meticulous documentation, unwavering commitment to factual accuracy, and the courage to fight back through proper legal channels could defeat even the most powerful and well-connected opponents when they choose to abuse their positions. Jasmine Crockett had walked into that Dallas Education Summit conference room as a respected but relatively unknown Congresswoman from Texas. She walked out of that federal courthouse in San Antonio as something far more significant, a national symbol of justice and accountability who had proven that in America, when you come armed with truth, documentation, and legal precision, you can defeat anyone, even the First Lady of the United States. The case established legal precedent that would protect countless future victims of political character assassination. It sent an unmistakable warning to powerful figures across the political spectrum that the era of consequence-free defamation was permanently over. And most importantly, it reaffirmed the fundamental American principle that justice is blind to political status, social connections, and positions of power. As the dust settled on this historic legal victory, one truth became crystal clear to political observers across the ideological spectrum. Jasmine Crockett had fundamentally changed the rules of political combat in America. You can still attack someone's policies with impunity, You can criticize their legislative record as harshly as you want. You can disagree with their political philosophy and campaign against their re-election with all the resources at your disposal. But if you choose to deliberately destroy their reputation with lies, if you coordinate character assassination campaigns using official government resources, if you spread false information designed to damage their ability to serve the public effectively, you will be held accountable under the full weight of American law. No matter who you are, no matter what title you hold, no matter how powerful you think you've become. The gavel had fallen. Justice had been served. Truth had triumphed over power. And a new chapter in American political accountability had begun, written by a brilliant lawyer from Texas who refused to let the most powerful woman in the country get away with destroying her reputation through calculated lies. But the story didn't end with that historic courthouse victory. What happened in the weeks following the verdict would reveal an even darker conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of American government, and Jasmine Crockett was about to uncover secrets that would shake the very foundations of political power in Washington. 3 days after the jury delivered their stunning $83 million verdict, Jasmine received an encrypted message on a secure communication app she didn't even know she had installed on her phone. The message was simple but chilling. They're planning something bigger. The courthouse was just the beginning. Meet me at the Lincoln Memorial tomorrow at midnight. Come alone. Your life may depend on it. The message came from Michael Chen, the White House whistleblower who had first provided her legal team with the smoking gun evidence that proved Melania's coordinated attack was premeditated. But Chen had gone into hiding immediately after his identity was leaked to conservative media outlets, and the federal authorities had been unable to locate him for weeks. Now, suddenly, he was reaching out with what sounded like a warning about imminent danger. Despite her lawyer's strong objections and the obvious risks involved, Jasmine made the decision to meet Chen at the memorial. She arrived at the deserted monument at exactly midnight, wearing a dark coat and staying in the shadows cast by the towering statue of America's greatest president. Chen emerged from behind one of the massive marble columns, his face gaunt and his eyes darting nervously around the empty space. "They tried to kill me," he whispered urgently, his voice barely audible above the sound of distant traffic. 3 days ago, someone ran my car off the road in Virginia. It was made to look like an accident, but I saw the license plate. It was registered to a shell company that traces back to the same people who coordinated the attacks against you." Chen pulled out a waterproof envelope filled with documents that would prove even more explosive than anything introduced during the trial. "These papers show that the operation against you was just a test run," he explained, his hands shaking as he spoke. "They've been developing systematic methods for destroying the reputations of dozens of Democratic politicians using sophisticated psychological research and social media manipulation techniques that go far beyond anything we exposed in court." The documents revealed a comprehensive political warfare program called Operation Clean Slate, designed to systematically eliminate rising Democratic stars who posed long-term threats to conservative political dominance. The program had been secretly funded through dark money networks involving multiple foreign governments, wealthy donors who demanded anonymity, and corporations with major federal contracts who feared increased regulation under Democratic leadership. Jasmine's case had been chosen as the pilot program because her legal background made her a particularly dangerous opponent, but also because her relative lack of national name recognition meant that destroying her reputation could be accomplished without generating excessive media attention. The success of the operation against her was supposed to provide a blueprint for similar attacks against other targets, including several prominent senators, governors, and rising House members who had been identified as future presidential candidates. But there was something even more sinister hidden in Chen's documents. The psychological research behind Operation Clean Slate had been conducted by a team of experts who had previously worked on disinformation campaigns for authoritarian governments in Eastern Europe and Africa. These specialists had developed sophisticated methods for using social media algorithms, targeted advertising, and coordinated bot networks to amplify false narratives and make them seem like organic grassroots movements. The most disturbing revelation was that the program had been testing methods for triggering real-world violence against political targets by carefully crafting messages that would inspire unstable individuals to take action without the operation's organizers being legally responsible for the consequences. Internal communications showed that they had been monitoring social media for individuals who showed signs of radicalization and then strategically exposing these people to inflammatory content designed to push them toward violent action. "They're not just trying to win elections anymore," Chen explained, his voice filled with fear and desperation. "They're trying to create a permanent system where anyone who opposes them can be destroyed or eliminated entirely. Your victory in court has made you an even bigger target because you've proven that their methods can be exposed and defeated." As Chen handed over the explosive documents, he revealed one final terrifying detail that would haunt Jasmine for months to come. The people behind Operation Clean Slate had been preparing contingency plans in case their legal defeat led to broader investigations. These plans included systematic destruction of evidence, elimination of witnesses who could testify about the program's existence, and, if necessary, the physical elimination of key targets who posed existential threats to the entire operation. The documents Chen had provided would eventually lead to congressional investigations, criminal referrals, and the exposure of a network of corruption that reached into multiple government agencies, foreign intelligence services, and corporate boardrooms. But that night, walking alone through the empty streets of Washington, Jasmine understood that her fight for justice had only just begun, and the stakes were higher than she had ever imagined. The woman who had started this journey simply trying to defend her reputation from false accusations had become something much more significant. The primary threat to a sophisticated authoritarian network that had been working for years to undermine American democracy from within. And now they knew exactly who she was and what she was capable of achieving when armed with truth, determination, and the courage to fight back against impossible odds. The real battle for America's future was about to begin, and Jasmine Crockett would be standing at the center of it all. What do you think about this landmark case that changed everything? Have we finally entered a new era where powerful figures must face real consequences for spreading deliberate lies about their opponents? Subscribe to Scale of Justice for more incredible stories where truth defeats corruption and ordinary people achieve extraordinary justice against impossible odds. Hit that notification bell so you never miss the moments when careful preparation and unwavering determination overcome even the most powerful adversaries. Because in America, when someone fights back with facts, documentation, and legal precision, absolutely anything is possible. Even defeating the First Lady of the United States and changing the rules of political accountability forever.